Welcome to my review of The Last of Us Episode 4, titled Please Hold My Hand. Good episode. We will be reviewing it as non-spoilery as possible. I will say this episode is starting to lose me in some ways, just as an FYI. Not massively, but in some ways, and I think it's important to point those ways out. This was overall a very good episode with a very good firefight in it. And it's also the payoff of Episode 3, because of course Episode 3 was building the world out and then obviously ended with that suicide note, which really softens Joel up, and you start to see the cracks in his stern demeanor appear in this episode, where he starts to teach Ellie about the world. You know, he's teaching her about petrol. Obviously it degrades over time, essentially becomes water, loses its octane, and siphoning. Just little bits and pieces. Ellie shoots someone, and you can again see Joel isn't happy about that. He's trying to protect her. He still has those walls pop up here and there where he starts to call her cargo and things, but for all intents and purposes, it's there. He is softening up, and it is that payoff. Now, where this started to lose me a little bit was the introduction of an original character named Kathleen, played by Melanie Lynskey. Now, it's interesting because, you know, we talk about, obviously, the inclusion of certain characters and traits that start to appear, and tropes. Now, obviously, one of those tropes in this day and age is, of course, the strong female character. Now, I haven't actually had that too much throughout The Last of Us up until this point, but now, with the inclusion of an original character, a leader, again, a woman, it starts to put some pieces together about the other things that we saw. The Firefly faction in the QZ, well, that was a woman as well. We had Tess, of course, was in charge, essentially, of Joel, a woman. And you can start to see this trend appearing of female leaders. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does beg the question, why are you doing that when you're introducing an original character, when you've already had a wealth of strong female leaders in the series already? It starts to fall apart a little bit. Anyway, I think, personally. But anyway, they are essentially on their way to Kansas City. It's not, well, they stop in Kansas City. It's not a location in the game that they stop at. But there's basically a group of raiders, which is Kathleen's raiders. She takes charge of a group. And they basically come into contact with these raiders, Joel and Ellie, and it leads to a really good firefight. The firefight is good, pretty brutal, pretty visceral, and I like that firefight actually quite a lot. It was really, really tense, well crafted as well, and this is in conjunction with beautiful cinematography in the opening shots. Very, very nice. Again, they've built this world out to such a degree that you look at these things and you go, yeah, that works really, really well. The visual effects work, the landscape, the locations, it's all put together in such a great way. Craig Mazin, of course, of Chernobyl, was doing a great job here. However, of course, you know, we get to this place, Kansas City, or a location within Kansas City, and then these raiders strike, and it leads to Joel essentially being pinned down by one. He's about to get killed. But Ellie, of course, had that gun from, you know, Episode 3, and she uses it, which leads to, you know, a pretty heartfelt interaction between the two of them, where, again, you start to see those cracks appear in Joel's stern, gruff demeanor, where he's like, you know, you shouldn't be doing this at a young age. The world is too harsh. It's not something you should be going through. We do learn that Ellie, that's not the first time Ellie's done anything like that. So that was interesting. That was interesting. But again, we're deviating from the game somewhat, and that's good and bad, because, you know, I've listened to people based on Episode 3's review, and a lot of people are like, this deviates so far from the game, there's no point. What was this? What was the point to that? The game's better, the interaction's better, the, you know, the characterization's better, etc., etc., etc. Now, there is good and bad elements from deviating from the games. I mean, when we get to, obviously, The Last of Us Part 2, if they deviate from the game to quite a high degree, then you're probably in for a better series, because of course there were elements from that game which vastly put people off, especially in the storytelling approach, you know, making you play as a murderer, all these kind of things. Sure, it'll be interesting to see if they do deviate, and they're setting a large precedent for deviation, which could be really, really good. Now this is, I keep using the word interesting, but it is interesting because we don't know where it's going to go. So the ideas that they're positing here are interesting, but we'll see whether there's payoff. So obviously this this Kathleen character, sorry, played by Melanie Lynskey, seems to be after her brother, and there seems to be this sort of warring faction, that they're kind of going up against. They're not Fireflies, they're not the old disbanded government and military. They're just basically raiders that have grouped together. But in her sort of approach to trying to find her brother, they go into a room and obviously find the murderers as well. They go into a room and the ground is sort of collapsing. And I wonder if what we're going to see there is that very, 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 very large, not clicker, but cordyceps monster, which was in the trailer. I wonder whether that's what we're going to be seeing coming through there. It's interesting. We didn't see, I don't think we saw any cordyceps monsters in this episode, actually. But again, that's good, because less is more when it comes to the sort of horror and tension element. And you do have to build up the world, and they're doing a very good job of that. But anyway, like I said, it's a good episode. It closes with Joel and Ellie essentially in a bit of bother. One thing I'm not massively keen on at the moment is that they've dropped the sort of flashbacks, which I think is a massive shame. We had some last episode, not a lot, and I feel like actually this world shines when they're doing the sort of prologue flashbacks. They're really, really, really good. And they shine, they build out the world, and how they were doing them was relaying elements which we were going to be seeing in the episode moving forwards. So it's interesting that they dropped that. I would still, I'm a bit curious as to why. But overall, still enjoying it. Weird that they're going to include an original character and have it run a trend, which we've already seen throughout the series already. It'd be good if you did something different with that. You could have done anything. It's an original character. Do something different than what we've already seen in the show. But whatever. Nonetheless, keen to see what they do moving forwards. Oh, and perhaps more interestingly, which is a bit of an Easter egg, which I'll kind of mention before I close out this review. This episode does feature Jeffrey Pierce, who was actually the original voice and mocap actor for Tommy in The Last of Us game. However, he will be playing, again, an original character, Kathleen's top lieutenant, Perry. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, there we have it. A bit of an Easter egg there for you. What do you think of this episode? Do you think the deviation's good? Do you think it's bad? I'd love to hear any and all of your thoughts. Please do drop them down below. If you're new here, do hit subscribe. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care.